We are back on OutKick 360. Chad Withrow with Paul Kuharsky on this Friday. Excited to talk some football with our next guest. Always a great interview. Tom Luginbill with ESPN, college football analyst, recruiting analyst as well. And there's a lot to get into in college football right now. We're in media day season, so there's plenty of talk going on. And Tom Luginbill joins us now to do some talking as well. Tom, really appreciate the time today. Thanks for hopping on with us.
You bet, guys. Looking forward to a great weekend. Thanks for having me.
Wow, what sterling audio. I'm blown away by your audio quality.
Is terrific. We mean that in all seriousness. You sound
Are
great.
you serious?
Yes.
Because I want to make sure it's only the best for you guys.
You sound
terrific.
Amazing. So thank you so much. So do you want to just host the show now with that audio? I'm kidding. No, you sound great, though. So here's
sure,
my
I'll
first
just join
question.
you for the rest of the show.
Yeah. We've got an hour and a half left. I'm sure you got nothing better to do. With Mike Gundy, first off, just always delivering great content, from the I'm a man, I'm 40 speech to standing up there and saying, I don't really know why Texas and Oklahoma are here and Bedlam is dead. Is Mike Gundy exactly what the Big 12 needs from an attitude standpoint? And do you think Brett Yormark sort of has that same attitude with some of his comments about what they need to do now to stay relevant with the Big Ten and with the SEC?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's given a little bit of that matter of fact, in your face, going to tell you what he thinks that maybe they lost when Mike Leach left the Big 12 and went to the Pac-12. Now, of course, at Mississippi State, especially in a setting like the media day setting that we have each and every summer this time of year. And he's just one of those guys. I got to be honest with you guys. I think he's to the point now. And I have talked to a lot of coaches over the last several months, and we've got NIL, we've got the transfer portal, we've got conference realignment. I think a lot of these guys are just fed up, or everybody's so worried about saying the wrong thing, or you're going to get canceled for this, you're going to say that. And Mike Gundy doesn't think in those terms. He says what he feels. He wears his heart on his chest, and he's one of those guys that, in my opinion, knows exactly who he is and exactly what his program is all about. Now, think about it. Texas and Oklahoma are bailing out right now. We've seen what's taken place with the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. If you're looking at the Big 12 right now, you've got Baylor, and now you've got really Oklahoma State. They're the big dogs, right? I mean, those are the teams that could take the lead and become the forefront of the conference if the conference is what we think it may be, whether it's next year, 3 years, or 5 years from now.
Yeah, and when you look at what, let's look at Texas Tech as another team that could possibly get in that mix of powers in the Big 12, the way it's constructed. $200 million project coming their way for a new facility. You've got Joey McGuire, who's a longtime high school coach who knows that state well. How big of a move is that, Tom, for Texas Tech to make that level of investment, especially now where everyone across the country is looking for the haves and not the have-nots?
I think it's necessary, and I think it's very forward-thinking, because we are embarking on an era in college football where we are widening the gap, right? If we keep going down this path where NIL now is affecting recruiting and everything's about money, and we're talking about power conferences and super conferences, well, there are only going to be a select group of programs and universities that can afford to live in that space. So I think if you're Texas Tech and you're putting forth stadium enhancements and facility projects, and you're doing things to show that, hey, if this thing keeps going down this path, we're going to be one of the ones that are taking that path, because there's going to be a lot that are going to have to make a choice as an institution and ask themselves, can we financially survive? Maybe not only survive, but could we thrive in this type of market if financially we get phased out because we either don't have the backing, or as a university, we don't want to make that commitment. And I think from Texas Tech's perspective, they hired the right guy. I've known Joey going back years and years. He actually used to coach in our Under Armour All-America game. He's a fantastic, tireless recruiter. He's exactly what they needed at the right time. And then to have this news come out here in relationship to what the university is doing, again, I think it sends a message that everybody's jockeying for position, right, guys? And at some point, the music's going to stop, and there's going to be a lot of people left without a chair.
It's all projection, obviously, with recruits as they come up.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that Arch Manning does not live up to the hype? What percentage chance is there that he's not what we hear from everybody he will be?
Very, very high. I think, I get asked all the time, is he overrated? Of course he is. Everybody that is in that position that has had that type of exposure, that type of spotlight is going to be overhyped. You can't help it. It's nothing that the kid's done wrong. It's just the world we're living in, and that magnifying glass is going to be on him. The quarterback position at the high school ranks and projecting it going forward is really, really difficult to do, because there are a lot of kids that are very, very talented physically, but it's a lot of the unknown variables that are so hard to identify or to secure or make sure you get right throughout the recruiting process that in many instances you may not find out if this guy has the right mental toughness, if he's got the right competitive temperament, if he's a worker in the off season, is he a leader in your locker room? Could he tear down your locker room? What type of personality is he? A lot of times until you get him, you may not be able to check all of those boxes. You want to check as many as you can. So Arch Manning to me is no different than any other high profile quarterback. The only problem is his last name's not Smith or Johnson or Williams. So it just adds that extra layer. Now, a lot of people say, well, why would he choose Texas over Alabama or over Georgia? Well, right now in the transfer portal era, guys, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't work out, if he finds that he made the wrong choice, he can just leave. I look at it from all right, well, who's around the quarterback? So if I'm looking at that decision, I'm saying, okay, I'm trying to compare Texas and Alabama and Georgia in their roster, and you can't compare. So Arch Manning's a piece of the puzzle for Texas, but it's a large puzzle that's still missing a lot of pieces. So I'm really intrigued to see how much better the roster can get for Sark at the University of Texas around, whether it's Quinn Ewers this fall or Arch Manning 2 years from now or 3 years from now. The rest of the roster is going to have to catch up because they're not playing with the same guys that Alabama and Georgia's playing with right now.
I want to ask you about Nico Iamaleava, also coming from California and committed to Tennessee. And there's only a handful of five-star quarterbacks. And now as we've entered the NIL era, the market for those five-star quarterbacks are going to be a list of 15 to 20 schools we would all expect that are extremely passionate about football, that have a lot of resources. But how much, Tom, does that also up the pressure meter on some of these guys? When we don't have firm reports on anything, but there's going to be discussions about what someone's going to get as a starting quarterback at an SEC school or a Big Ten school if they're a 4 or 5-star guy. How much does that add to the outside pressure on some of these players? And just your specific thoughts on Iamaleava as a prospect.
So I think it's significant and it's enormous, and it's very, at the same time, problematic. We look at that particular kid. My concern is that he is very caught up in the recruiting process. He's very caught up in the exposure, in the hype. I think that it's been my experience that when that happens, it becomes very, very difficult for that particular player, whoever it may be, to keep his feet on the ground, come back down to earth, and realize that he's going to go from being a big fish in a small pond to being a little bitty guppy in a massive lake. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be difficult, and all eyes are going to be on him. There's going to be expectations that are not applied to other people. What is the mental capacity of 16, 17, 18-year-olds to be able to handle that without a monetary figure tied to it? Now you add the monetary side to it, and I think it exacerbates the problem. And I've heard people say, well, the market will course correct itself. Well, it may or it may not. The problem is generally when we talk about name, image, and likeness and how it is seeped down into the recruiting ranks, a lot of those people that are throwing those dollars at kids, they have money to burn. They have money to lose. All right. The market will generally correct itself if we're talking about businesses that want to stay in business, right? If we're talking about people that are backing these kids or investing in these kids, and then all of a sudden it becomes a very poor investment and they're out. So I do think it's concerning. I think he's a good prospect. I'm very concerned on the side of him focusing on the things that matter. I mean, at the end of the day, this was never intended to be involved in recruiting. Now, anybody with half a brain that saw this unleashed with essentially no rules, no guidelines, no regulations could have seen that this was what was going to happen. So this isn't necessarily name, image, and likeness. This isn't even pay to play. This is pay to sign. All right. Well, that's the easy part. Now, once you get them, the likelihood of those guys panning out is not overly high. It is a huge risk. So I think over the next 2 to 3 seasons, I think it's going to start with Quinn Ewers this fall, guys, at Texas. Talking about a player that has not played a football game since the end of his junior season. He has yet to attempt a college pass, and apparently he's a multimillionaire. He hadn't played a snap. I mean, what are we doing here? This doesn't, I mean, it to me, it's insanity, but this is the world we're living in. So these kids are going to have to step up, and they better be as advertised, or it's all going to come crashing down. Because right now we don't have a lot of guys, and we don't have much of a sample size to say, hey, listen, this didn't work out very well, or that guy did not pan out. We're going to have more of that here in the next 2 to 3 years.
Tom Luginbill with ESPN is our guest on OutKick 360. You could argue that Tennessee has not really had an identity since maybe Lane Kiffin in 2009 when they were just a brash, arrogant, trash-talking team for 1 year. Do they have an identity now with Josh Heupel because of his style of play and how they immediately became the fastest-playing offense in America in year one? And it's clear he's not going to shy away from that identity.
There's no question. And you just nailed it. What is the identity? It's to run as many plays as we can in a 60-minute football game and play keep away from the other team. That's essentially what they do. And they want to push the ball down the field. They want to create big explosive plays in the vertical passing game. And they're going to go so fast to where they hope they catch you off guard, or you're trying to substitute and you can't get the right personnel on the field. And now they got you, and you're stuck in the wrong personnel package on defense, and they are just steamrolling. I think the thing to note, and I had Tennessee early in the year last year in a very, very well played game where they lost to Pitt in week 2.
It's a great game.
That was before Pitt. Yeah, it was a great game. And that was before I think people really realized how good Pitt was. But Tennessee had every opportunity to win that game. And that was the game that Hendon Hooker replaced. Who was it?
Joe
I don't
Milton.
even think about it.
Joe Milton.
Joe Milton,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, he replaced Joe Milton, who was not playing well that day. And next thing you know, Hendon Hooker finds a groove and they get rolling. But the one thing I noticed when I went to practice prior to that game was whatever the problems were internally at Tennessee, they weren't as much about talent as I think people think that it was, because there are some talented football players on that team. And there's some core pieces of the puzzle that were a perfect fit for what Josh Heupel wanted to do. And they hit the ground running. Now, as we know, they've raised the bar of expectation, right? And they did it sooner than people expected, which means that, there's a big microscope on them that is expecting a lot of things. How much better can they get from year 1 to year 2? Has the roster that drastically improved that quickly? Because remember, they're still undermanned scholarship wise. They still got NCAA stuff looming over their head. So they're working the transfer portal. They do have a quarterback and they do have an identity. And I think people look at them differently now. I think if you looked at Tennessee 2 years ago, you looked at them, if you're an SEC team outside of maybe 2 or 3 programs, you looked at Tennessee and you put a W in the win column and you probably wrote it in ink. Now, I don't know if you're doing that. If you are doing it, you're writing it in pencil.
Do you have a team or two maybe at this stage that you feel is going to achieve beyond the general expectation this coming fall?
Yeah, I think Utah has a chance to be really, really good. I think they are a dark horse potential college football playoff like cusp team, a team that if they play the way they're certainly capable of playing. They get those secondary guys back that they were missing in the Rose Bowl a year ago. They've got themselves a quarterback. They're physical up front in the trenches on both sides of the ball. To me, I think they've got a chance to be a really, really exciting football team. And I know, it's easy to sit here and say that, Miami's going to be vastly improved. And I think that they will be, because I think they have 2 things. They've got the right leadership from a head coaching perspective, and they got a quarterback in Tyler Van Dyke that is an absolute difference maker. And so I think they could be a team that have got enough pieces of the puzzle to give some people some fits, because they've got athletes. I think they've got a new direction. And as I mentioned, the quarterback is really, really good.
So my second Lane Kiffin mention here in this interview. Let's talk about Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Big Lane Kiffin guy.
Yeah.
The strategy, and I have to call it a strategy, and maybe it's a forced strategy, I don't know, but Lane Kiffin not recruiting well in the high school ranks, but the number one transfer portal school. They lose 20 of their 22 starters off last year's team. And, Tom, it's basically a quick change of a bunch of transfers coming in, and they're going to try to run it back with a bunch of new guys that produced for other programs. What do you think about this approach from Lane Kiffin, and is he the type of coach that can pull this off?
Well, I think that the approach is maybe not as risky as everybody makes it out to be if, and this is the if, when you're fishing in the transfer portal, you've done an outstanding job of identifying if the guy you're considering taking is in the portal because he's a problem. That's number one. You don't want to bring that into your locker room. And then number two, how many actual years of eligibility does he have left? Is he a 4-to-play 3 guy, meaning he still has a redshirt year and then 3 years of eligibility after that? How much long-term depth can you still have by going that route versus going primarily the high school recruiting route? And the answer to that question is you got to stay away from 1-year guys. I think if you do that, you could get yourself into some trouble because you're not building and developing any long-term depth within your program. You're not developing players in your program. But if you get guys that got 2, 3, maybe even 4 years left of eligibility, that's a different conversation. And so, if you feel like, and again, recruiting is a high-risk proposition at the high school level. You're dealing with kids, okay? And you're dealing with a lot of unknown variables. And if you feel like you can go after a guy that's 2 years older, that's maybe played Power 5 football, maybe he started 5 or 6 games, you know so much more about that guy than you do about the high school guy that it actually may be the safer bet. But again, you got to identify why he's in the portal and make sure there's multiple years of eligibility remaining. I kind of like it. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch and see how this thing unfolds because he gets the headlines, but there's a bunch of people, Spavital at Texas State didn't recruit a high school player or sign a high school player, I think in the last 2 classes. All right. They just went out and transfer portal and brought a bunch of other guys in. So it's going to be fascinating to see how these teams put themselves together over the next 2 to 3 years.
How does Brian Harsin make it work at Auburn with everything this offseason, with basically a failed coup by certain donors? Expectations are always going to be high at Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
He came very close to upsetting Alabama in year 1, but overall not a great season. I mean, what is success for Brian Harsin going into this year, and how do you make that happen with all these other factors around your program?
Well, that's a great question, and the scheduling is brutal as it usually is. You got to identify a quarterback. Do they have an answer there? Maybe, Zach Calzada played, quite a bit of football. They at least have more bodies in the room than maybe what they were pleased with a year ago. But when you look at that job, I've always said that's one job where you are hired to be fired because it's just a matter of time. And that's, for the most part true in the coaching profession in general, but the leash is so short there and the expectation is so massive to perform. And you're dealing with an Alabama across the state. And then you're wedged in between Mississippi and Georgia. So you've got, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and then you got Georgia and you've got Alabama, Auburn. They're all in there and everybody's fishing in the same pool for players. And now you're expected to beat your in-state rival, then you're expected to beat your crossover team, and then you're expected to steal one away from LSU, while all the while you can't lose or afford to lose to a team that everybody says you're supposed to beat, which could very easily happen. I think that he's going to probably have to win 9, and I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if they're good enough. And listen, Brian Harsin didn't all of a sudden take stupid pills when he signed on as the Auburn head coach. The guy's won a lot of football games. He's had a very strong strategy. He's had a very strong blueprint in how to execute what he wants to do. He's a staunch disciplinarian, but he has stepped into a scenario here that was unlike anything I think he could have possibly imagined. No matter how many people might have tried to paint the picture to make him realize it, he probably had no idea. So I think this is going to be a very, very interesting fall for them. If the quarterback doesn't pan out, I think they're in big trouble.
How do you envision this Georgia team stacking up against last year's Georgia team?
It's interesting because they are now going down the path that Alabama has already been down and Clemson has now been down a couple of times. And that is when you get to the top and you win it all, and you spend an entire offseason with everybody patting you on the back and telling you how good you are you able to get right back on the field, right back in the swing of things with maybe a new cast of characters? You lose all of that NFL talent. Are you able to get on the field and put yourself in position to do it again? Because to me, everybody talks about Nick Saban and the process and all of this and that. I think Nick Saban's greatest trait that's maybe the most undervalued is he's somehow able to get 18 to 22-year-old kids to perform at their highest level when everybody's patting them on the back. It's amazing, because what's the natural inclination for a young person to do when he's receiving a lot of accolades and everybody's telling them how good they are? They want to buy into it, right? They start reading the press clippings. Next thing you know, you're not working as hard in the weight room. You're not practicing as hard. That's a really difficult thing to get your kids to do. I think that's Kirby Smart's greatest task, is how do you get this team now to show that they can have significant losses? They can lose guys in the transfer portal. They can lose guys to the NFL draft and still be playing for the SEC championship, because they're that good in their depth. And the team knows that it doesn't get easier when you win the national title. It actually gets harder. And I think that's what's made some of those Dabo teams that he's had really, really good, great in many ways. And I think that's what's made Nick Saban's team so good, is they handle success well. Can Georgia do the same thing with a lot of new faces?
5 first-round draft picks on defense alone for Georgia this past season. So a lot of talent behind them, though, so we'll see how that works out. A lot of talent coming into Notre Dame with Marcus Freeman and what he's done in recruiting. Is this a sustainable pace for him from what you've seen very early on in his tenure, Tom?
Potentially. I think that, generally this is kind of, you carry the momentum of being the fresh young face, the new head coach. You got a new staff, and now all of a sudden you're doing things your way. And he is a grinder in recruiting. He's very, very well received. Is it sustainable? Yes. I still think at the end of the day, if Notre Dame's going to get on the field with an Ohio State, they're going to get on the field with an Alabama, they're going to get on the field with a Clemson or a Georgia, they're going to have the same level of personnel in the offensive and defensive line. And I'm not just talking starters. I'm talking about rotational depth, because at the end of the day, that is what is separated, Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson and Georgia. That's what separated them from everybody else. And so in order for Notre Dame to do that, they have to go into those teams' backyards and pull those kids out of there and give them a reason not to go to Alabama, not to go to Georgia. That's what Ohio State was able to do with guys like the Bosa brothers and Von Bell at safety, who was from Georgia. Raekwon McMillan, the linebacker, he was from Georgia. They dipped down into Florida for a lot of kids. They've been able to do that in their offensive and defensive front. Can Notre Dame do that? Can they steal a guy from Alabama? Can they steal a guy from Georgia? Maybe do it 2 or 3 times in the defensive and offensive front. They're going to have access to quarterbacks. They're going to have access to skill guys. Those guys are everywhere. But if you're going to compete with the big boys at the elite level, it's up front where you're going to have absolute difference makers.
Tom Luginbill, ESPN, has been our guest, and a terrific one at that. Tom, I'm curious, when do you get your game assignments for week 1 of the college football season? I'm sure you don't have it now, do you? Or do you?
No, I don't, but it's funny you asked that, because we actually just got an email yesterday stating that they're getting ready to put together our week 0 and our week 1. I do know that I'll have 2 high school broadcasts. We do our high school kickoff weekend where we broadcast games on all of our platforms and networks. So I think I'll probably do 2 of those. And then I'll know my week 1, I think, within the next week. But then once we start the season, we don't actually find out where we're going until the Sunday prior to the game. Each and every week, as the deck gets shuffled and the TV matchups get aligned. And I just know that generally my crew, Dave Pash, myself, Dusty Dvorak, we've generally been 3:30 ABC, noon ABC, or noon ESPN. So we always kind of know what window we're going to be in.
Is it the high school football weekend, week 0, then week 1? In that order, yes. I feel like every year starting mid-August. That's right. There's no doubt about it. So you start counting down the days, and I can't believe how fast this summer is gone. And so I think I think this fall is going to be so much fun, just because of the transfer portal. There's all these complaints, there's all these things going on, and everybody is hating on this or hating on that. And listen, is everything perfect? No, but it is going to be very, very interesting to see how all of this unfolds over the next 2 to 3 years. Tom, appreciate the time. We'll have to get you back on closer to football season. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Great stuff.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Tom Luginbill, ESPN college football analyst, recruiting analyst, does a great job on their broadcast of games as well. Really enjoyed talking with him. We're going to take a quick break. Orlando Brown turned down a huge contract with the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll discuss. That's coming up next. This is OutKick 360. Welcome back. OutKick 360 on a Friday. Chad Withrow, Paul Kuharsky with you. Some NFL news and notes. Orlando Brown Jr. and the Kansas City Chiefs, Paul, failed to reach an agreement on a long-term deal. And in this deal, 6 years, $139 million that included over a $30 million signing bonus and $95 million of that in the first 5 years. He's going to be a franchise player now, franchise tag for the Chiefs.
All four guys who had franchise tags did not reach long-term deals. That's Bates, the safety up in Cincinnati, Dalton Schultz with the Cowboys. I'm forgetting the fourth guy. This sounds like a hell of a deal for Orlando Brown, but you never know what it would have been until you see the paper, and we won't see the paper because he didn't sign it. So they both sides said, they're hopeful he'll sign a long-term deal in the long term, but they cannot now negotiate until the end of the 2022 season. So until the Chiefs finish playing this season, he's playing under the franchise tag this year. So a bit surprising because of the four, this is the one that tried the hardest to get something done.
And I'm assuming the signing bonus guaranteed money was at issue. If I'm trying to think of something that would be the objection, trying to get more than the $30 million as part of that contract. Either
I
way,
would
it's gonna be
imagine
franchise
so.
tag.
I would imagine so. I think premier tackles are probably doing better than $30 million signing bonus, and we didn't get guarantee there, so could be 30. And the fact that we didn't get a guarantee there is probably telling. Total guarantee.
Paul, one half of the McCourty twins, Jason McCourty, announces his retirement today. 13-year career, big part of that with the Tennessee Titans. I know you have thoughts on Jason and his career.
Jason McCourty played 8 seasons with the Titans here. We all got to know him well. Drafted as a 6th rounder, I think 2009, out of Rutgers. The best teams that he was on were 9 and 7. He endured 2 and 14 and 3 and 13, the Ken Wisenhunt years, and he was always a terrific stand-up guy. He was a major spokesman for the team, and he had a good career as a cornerback. He was an efficient and effective player, far more out of a 6th-round pick than you would expect. Went on to play for the Browns, obviously the Patriots, where he got to play a couple or a few years with his brother. Played last year for the Miami Dolphins. That's an impressive career for an impressive guy. I wish him nothing but the best in retirement. I think he could be a media guy. Those Patriots years probably got him enough notoriety if he wanted to be a media guy. I think he'd be a terrific talk radio guy if that's what he wanted to be. I always thought of him as a candidate when we were on terrestrial radio here in Nashville, where there was a lack of former Titans who were good candidates, when that's something they were always looking for there. I think he'd be good. You never know, you always kind of had some guys you thought would be good that turned out to be bad, and some guys that you weren't so sure about that were better than you expected. I think Jason McCourty's a pretty safe bet. That he would be good at it, that he would be diligent at it, that he would be able to talk about multiple sports. And, you always need that time window for players that you played with to pass so you could be more critical. But I think Jason McCourty's got a bright future ahead of him, whatever he chooses to do.
Yeah, and I feel like those guys that are stand-up guys to the media and are great to go to for quotes during really tough times for a franchise, like you mentioned, sort of the lack of success.
And he was vanilla,
when he was
because
there,
he had to be
but
at times.
Those guys kind of hold a special place in your heart too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're stand-up guys during some, not some lean years for a team. So, great career for Jason McCourty. Glenn Guilbeau is going to talk some SEC West with us. We got a lot to talk about.
Well, he and Chad fight. There's potential for a fight here.
Could be a bit of an argument also. Glenn Guilbeau of OutKick.com, SEC columnist, is next. We are back. OutKick 360 is part of the OutKick network. Thanks to everyone out there either listening on the radio network on this Friday afternoon, watching it, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. We salute you. We thank you. And we've had a fun show so far today. Final hour of the show. Coming up in 20 minutes, we got Ned Michaels, who's currently with the BBC. He is in Scotland right now at St. Andrews. So we'll get a full British Open discussion going with Ned Michaels in 20 minutes. But right now, so Glenn Guilbeau, he's been a guest on this show. He covers the SEC, a columnist at OutKick.com. I've written a lot over, the course of my career, but I'm a little bit newer, a little bit green to the OutKick writing, a weekly column every week. So I write a column about a juice meter. And Paul, I described it to you guys, but a juice meter across the SEC where very subjective. I looked at recruiting rankings, transfer portal, off-season buzz, if there's off-field incidents or not around each team, and kind of gave a little paragraph summation of the juice around each team.
I heard somebody didn't like it.
And Glenn, I looked down on Twitter. I'm like, man, I haven't heard from Glenn in a while. And I looked down, and Glenn is, I wouldn't say destroying me or crushing it, but having some fun at my expense with the story. Now, Glenn's spent a lot more time in writing than I have, so I fully admit that going in. So Glenn Guilbeau is on with us right now. Glenn, I've got to ask, was your major objection the content of the story? Was it the overuse of the word juice, the term juice in general? Or was it opening with a quote from the great Derek Dooley that threw you off when you read the article?
I like the juice part, and as I said in the first tweet, I like the column. But I didn't like starting off with Derek Dooley. It was a good quote by Dooley, but I think Derek was probably one of the least juicy coaches in SEC history. I would say, yes. Other than his orange pants. His orange pants were cool. But
there's a lot of irony in opening with a Derek Dooley quote, because I then followed it up with reference to Butch Jones, who's another failed SEC coach and failed Tennessee coach. So I definitely opened with two guys who aren't juicy to talk about juice. That's for sure.
Well, Butch though had a couple of winning seasons. He had a couple of decent seasons. I thought he was going to be better than he ended up being, but no, I was kind of half kidding too with that stuff, and I since took the tweets down.
Oh, you don't need to do that. No,
I looked at him again. And I thought, you know what? I was out of line.
It was fine. No, it was totally fine. But you're right. There was no juice around the Derek Dooley tenure at Knoxville. There were back-to-back 9-win seasons for Butch Jones, and he lasted 5 years instead of 3. So there definitely was some success there. I've got to get your take on this, though, Glenn, because I was thinking about your comments about Derek Dooley being quoted in my piece, and it got me thinking about 2010 Tennessee LSU in Baton Rouge in one of the nuttier endings to a football game that I can ever remember. I was at a tailgate in Tuscaloosa getting ready to watch Alabama and Florida that night, actually watching the game with Clay Travis at a tailgate, and a bunch of Tennessee fans were watching it, and I've never experienced a celebration like that, followed by people having to beckon you back to the television because something had happened, and what had happened was way too many men on the field for Tennessee. What was your perspective covering LSU at that time of that game?
Boy, that was two head coaches who really didn't know what they were doing at the end of that game. I mean, that LSU was one of the least deserving victors that I can remember. They get down to the goal line, and actually, this wasn't Les Miles' fault. This was the offensive coordinator, Gary Croton, at the time. They're on the 1 yard line, and the clock's running out. The play clock is running out, and he sends in 5 substitutes. For a dive play, that they eventually won the game with. But he tried something fancy, and that didn't work, and they didn't get lined up. And then T-Bob Hebert, who's a radio star now in Baton Rouge, he saw the clock running down. He was the smartest guy on the field at that point. He just snapped the ball so LSU wouldn't lose by the clock right there. And then that was the play. It was fumbled. Tennessee got the ball, but Tennessee had too many men on the field because Derek messed up too. Then LSU got another play. Les overruled Gary Croton and just said, give it to the fullback and let's go up the middle, which is what he should have done first, and they won the game. But it was one of the worst coached endings of a game I've ever seen, and really Tennessee deserved to win.
Give us an update to the degree that you can about how Brian Kelly has fared and is faring in his first offseason at LSU.
Well, you know, he inherited a mess. There's no question about it. He inherited much more of a mess than Ed Orgeron inherited a very good program. People forget the recruiting season before Les got fired. He had a number 5 class. So Orgeron walked into a good situation and made it better by getting Joe Burrow. But Brian Kelly walked into a situation where the roster was a mess, the staff was a mess. I mean, you saw the bowl game LSU was in. That was embarrassing. So since then, gradually, he's filled the roster through the portal. But, you know, the portal's a lot of backups, really, for the most part. So, I don't know how good they're going to be. I think they're going to be pretty average, actually. But and then he kind of started slow in recruiting. But this July, as I got a story up this week, LSU's got 9 commitments since July 1, and they jumped 35 spots in the Rivals.com rankings. So he's made a late surge in recruiting, and that was very much needed because the fans here were getting restless. But as far as this season's concerned, they're not going to be much better than 8 wins, I would say.
I'm going to get back into football, but I want to stick at LSU and talk about basketball just for a second. I read a lengthy story at The Athletic this morning detailing Matt McMahon. And, I mean, Glenn, it was ground zero. You know, when he got there and the immediate defections, I think there was a time where they didn't have a player, a scholarship player for a short time, right?
They had no players. They couldn't even keep Sharif O'Neal, who, you know, was barely played in his 2 seasons at LSU.
And now they look good. They have a solid roster from what he's done. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it really is. Matt McMahon would have been a great hire for LSU, even without all the impending probation. But when you consider, you know, what he's done since he took over, I mean, I think he's done a fabulous job. I mean, they're going to be he's taken them from being really bad to being slightly below average or average is what I think. And that's really something, because I was thinking they might be like a 2 or 3 win team in the SEC next year. Now they look like they might be closer to 500. So he's done a fantastic job so far, considering what he's up against.
You know, one team on my juice meter in the SEC West that I don't think I had having a lot of juice was Mississippi State, which is, you know, you think about Mike Leach and his personality, and you think there's going to be a lot of juicy comments from him in the offseason. We haven't really seen much of that. And there's not a lot of buzz around that team or talk about them, Glenn, but is that necessarily a bad thing for Mississippi State when you see what they have returning this year? What do you think about that program heading into this season for Mike Leach?
Well, you haven't heard a lot of juice out of Mike Leach in State. That's because Mike Leach is in Key West partaking in drinking juice. Hitting
the juice. Absolutely.
Yeah, he takes it easy over the summer, big time. What a personality. But, I mean, Will Rogers is back. You know, I talked to Will Rogers at the Manning Passing Academy last month, and that story was up this week at OutKick. And as long as they got Will Rogers and they have Mike Leach figuring out the passing game, they're going to be good, because he's able to make average quarterbacks better and just knows how to get receivers of any ability open. So they're always going to be a threat on offense, and they were pretty good on defense last year. I think they're going to be about the same or better this season in the SEC. I'm really impressed with Leach as a coach, and his defenses. I mean, he doesn't coach the defense, but his defenses are usually better than you think. So I think they're going to be right there in the middle of the pack in the league.
Do you think Zach Calzada is going to be good enough at quarterback to make Auburn good enough to keep Brian Harsin around for another season, given everything he's faced this past offseason?
boy, he's got 4 commitments, and he only had 2 before July. So things are just not going well there. And, Calzada is an average quarterback who had a great game against Alabama last year. But for the most part, he's pretty average. He was not going to be the starter without the injury to Haynes King last year. So, no, I don't. I would be surprised if Harsin makes it to 2023. I see Auburn being, around 500 this season, maybe win 6 or 7, but that might not be enough for him to survive.
Good or bad, give us your biggest surprise team in the SEC, and understanding that it's July 15th.
So this could be kind of, I guess, overrated or underrated right now coming in, or under-discussed or over-discussed coming into the season.
I think Florida might be a surprise team this year. I mean, I don't think they're going to make the championship game, the SEC championship game, but I think they're going to be better than they look, than their roster looks. And they haven't been banging it up in recruiting either so far under new coach Billy Napier. But I really think Napier's an excellent hire. And I he's decent at quarterback where LSU is not. And I think Napier might be a pleasant surprise this season.
Glenn, I know you're headed to Atlanta next week for SEC Media Days, and there's a lot to look forward to with SEC Media Days next week. You'll be there with OutKick, and you'll be writing and have a lot of great coverage of that event. What are you most looking forward to next week? Is it simply whatever we get out of Greg Sankey about the direction or the lack thereof with movement with the SEC?
Well, I'm not expecting much from Greg Sankey. He knows how to play the little cat and mouse game. He did it in Destin, and he'll do it again in Atlanta. He's not going to say much about that. He tends to try to be kind of cute, and I think you'll see that. What I'm looking forward to is what the coaches have to say about USC and UCLA's addition to the Big Ten, and what the Big Ten might do, and what Notre Dame might do, and what the SEC might do as far as adding Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, Duke, what have you. I'm interested in hearing what Coach Saban says about that, and what the coaches say. I think that's probably going to be the most interesting thing about media days going in.
Do you think that Brian Kelly will revert to that Southern accent at SEC Media Days, or will it go back to more of a standard accent from before when he was at Notre Dame?
He only used that accent once.
The one time. Yeah, he got really caught up in the moment.
It was really bad.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was trying to do. It was the worst Southern accent imitation I've heard since The Big Easy with Dennis Quaid. Did you see that movie?
Oh, yeah.
There was some terrible accents in that movie. And I'm from New Orleans, so I know the real accents. But no, I don't know what Kelly was trying to do there. The only thing he did worse than that was when he tried to dance.
Yeah.
But no, I want to hear what Kelly has to say about Notre Dame. He must have seen Notre Dame possibly leaning toward moving to a conference, that's an informed guy on Notre Dame. Obviously, I'd like to hear what he thinks Notre Dame going to the Big Ten. So that's going to be interesting. If he takes the bait, he might not want to talk about it. But Kelly's he's got a tough job ahead of him. There's no question. Their roster is still not in good shape. There's a lot of weak spots on that LSU team. And I'm hearing they may be picked last in the West by the media at SEC Media Days.
Glenn Guilbeau, he will be in Atlanta for SEC Media Days next week on behalf of OutKick. He's an SEC columnist for OutKick.com, at LSU Beat Tweet on Twitter. Glenn, thanks so much. Appreciate you hopping on with us and talking a little football. Have fun in Atlanta next week.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Thank you. Hope to be on again next week.
So from the SEC to Scotland, coming up next, Ned Michaels, who is covering the British Open, part of the broadcast with the BBC, which is amazing. We'll talk to Ned about that experience and about this tournament so far. That's coming up. This is OutKick 360. OutKick 360 on a Friday. Chad Withrow and Paul Kuharski with you. British Open going on right now at the Old Course at St. Andrews in Scotland. Momentarily, we're going to be joined by Ned Michaels. He is a longtime friend of ours, friend of the show, Paul, in a past radio life in Nashville. He was a contributor on our show, a host on our station, and he has done well for himself because he's a part of the three-man crew on the BBC broadcast of the British Open. So we'll talk to Ned.
I did a double take when I heard this. It's a fantastic career move for him and progress, and congratulations to him.
Yeah, good. No, that's awesome. Good for him. We'll ask him about that process, and obviously about the tournament that everyone's watching right now, and everyone's going to be watching over the weekend. Speaking of that tournament, leaderboard update for you. Cameron Smith is at 13 under par, and this is through 2 rounds for everyone now. Cameron Smith through 2 rounds, 13 under, 2 strokes ahead of Cameron Young, the American, at 11 under par. Rory McIlroy, the FanDuel favorite coming into the tournament, is at 10 under par. Victor Hovland at 10 under. Dustin Johnson alone at 9 under in 5th. Scotty Scheffler at 8 under. Tyrell Hatton at 8 under. And then there's a big group at 7 under par. Phil Mickelson, Tiger Woods, neither one of them made the cut. Phil Mickelson finishes 5 over par. Tiger Woods, 9 over par.
And the cut was even, right?
Yes. Some notable Americans in the mix. Xander Schauffele at 5 under par. Jordan Spieth at 4 under par. Harold Varner III, 4 under par. Patrick Reed also at 4 under par. And there are some Live Tour names close to the top of the leaderboard, most notably Dustin Johnson, who's in 5th right now at 9 under par. So we are connecting with Ned Michaels, and we will talk some golf with him as soon as he gets up. Ned, by the way, nice enough to join us. I think he said, I thought it was a 6-hour difference when we were there in London, Paul, for the Titans game in 2018, is what my memory tells me it was, but I think it may be 7 hours different. So I think it's 11:22 possibly right now. We'll ask Ned, in fact, because he is ready to go with us right now.
What an opening question.
Ned,
what time is it
Ned,
where you
great
are?
seeing you, my friend. It's been too long. Congrats on all the success. And yes, first question, what time is it where you are right now?
No, it's a 6-hour difference, so it's 10:20 something or other. But we had a long day of coverage because over here I'm working for the BBC this week, so we stayed on for McIlroy and then the post-game report that we do. But then the great part is we all come back to the house, cook a nice dinner. We might have a libation or two, and we get to watch the show because it airs again this evening. So we just kind of have a nice hang and detox of the day. So it's a fun event. But hey, before we get into this, I want to say so happy for all the success you all are having.
Well, thank you so much, Ned, and we're happy for your success as well.
To you.
It's great to reconnect with you, and it's awesome. So I want to start with that. You have been around golf media in a number of different ways for a while. How do you get involved with Peter Allis, a legend in England, and how do you work your way up to this point right now? Kind of take us through the process of what led you to this BBC house that you're in right now at the British Open at St. Andrews.
Well, you guys know how it is. It's one of those things, you're in the right place at the right time. But I took on the mantra of the only way to be in the right place at the right time is to be everywhere all the time. So when I started, it was I just said yes to everything. And I still will say yes to just about everything because I love it so much. But I worked at Fox, and there's a fellow by the name of Ken Brown, who was a 5-time Ryder Cupper and is a European superstar, and he's from the UK. And he just kind of took me under his wing for whatever reason. Either he saw something in me or he thought, God, this guy's so terrible, I got to save him from himself. And they needed an American voice on the BBC's coverage. He threw my name in the hat and went to bat for me. And, now I'm the American voice for BBC Golf. So it is beyond an honor to be able to do it. We do the Ryder Cup, we do the Open Championship, and then we'll do also Solheim Cup and the Women's Open, a handful of events. It's an incredible crew. And we just actually this week had the life celebration of Peter Alice, who's maybe the best to have ever done it. It was here in St. Andrews. They weren't able to have the ceremony for him during COVID. So we had it was a 2-hour celebration where so many stories were told. And then
we may have lost Ned for a second, probably froze up. We'll try to reconnect with Ned. Froze up on the Zoom. Hopefully we can reconnect with him.
A great lesson to, if you're willing to do everything, you got to be right time, right place involves being a lot of places. So we've got that from him.
Yeah,
Looks
Ned is back with us. Ned, I want to start with this in terms of your coverage. What is the strategy for covering the live players with the BBC in this tournament, and how you discuss that story? Is it even a story with you during the broadcast? And what are some of the differences that you see with American coverage of that story versus what you guys are doing with the BBC?
Yeah, this is my philosophy. This doesn't come down from the top or anything for me. I'm here to talk about the 150th Open Championship. And if you're qualified to get into this championship, frankly, I don't care how you got here. You earned your way into this event. So I don't care what tour you're playing on. I don't care if you're a winner on the PGA Tour, the European Tour. I'm talking about the Open Championship, because at the end of the week, somebody's going to have the Cleric Jug, and there's not going to be an asterisk by it on what tour he plays on, how much he's getting paid. All of that is totally irrelevant. Somebody's going to win the 150th Open Championship at St. Andrews. And for me, as a golf fanatic and fan, that's as good as it gets. So I don't really care. And for me, it's just not a storyline this week.
Separate of the British Open, just your quick thoughts on what it's doing to the game and the two factions here.
So it's tricky because I get some side of it. I played on the Asian Tour. I played on the European Tour. I know what it's like. I haven't played many tours. That money is appealing. And some players like McIlroy play for championships and they play for legacy. And same as Tiger. But at the same time, I understand why you would go to live and take the money. I remain an optimist in this, that hopefully somehow what live is doing is going to bring golf into the forefront, and somehow the tour, somehow the DP/European World Tour and live can coexist, because that's only going to be good for the game of golf, in my opinion. And right now, I'll tell you what, if you are a top 200 player in the world, maybe 150, if you're a top 150 player in the world, you're getting ready to play for more money than you have ever thought about playing for. And to me, as a former player, that's really exciting to think about, because every one of the tours, PGA, European Tour, Live Tour, Asian Tour, they're all now playing for more money. They're flush with cash. And to me, as a player, that's the exciting part.
Cameron Smith with the 2-stroke lead heading into the third round. What's been keying his performance so far, and do you think it's sustainable?
Oh, boy, is it sustainable. I mean, the guy's got the big mullet, right? And, Chad, mullet is a lifestyle, and he's living it. Yeah, he is this dude.
He looks like he should permanently have a Foster's oil can, the beer can, in his hand at all times. Just like looking at him, I feel like he should be playing like Edward 40 Hands from back in college, but have two Foster's oil cans in his hands. That's the way the guy looks.
And the cool part about it is there are a couple of young players now from Australia who qualified here for the Open, and they too are rocking the long blonde mullet. So he's putting on the look. But listen, this guy is for real. He's the reigning Players Champion. He won the Century Tournament Champions out in Maui, shot like 34 under. But here's the thing I like about Cameron Smith right now is he can win in a multitude of ways. He can win putting well. He can win hitting the ball well. He can win just kind of working his way around the golf course. And 2 years ago, that wasn't the case. He wasn't a good enough ball hitter, and he under pressure kind of hooked the driver, and he's eradicated that from his game. So this guy, yeah, he can make it to the finish line, and he doesn't have to have his best stuff. If he has his best stuff, it's pretty much over.
Can Dustin Johnson make it to the finish line the way he's playing right now, 4 strokes off the pace at 9 under par?
Yeah, but I do think, and again, this is where the live comes in. I mean, he's been playing 3-round events, and I do think that's going to hurt him. They've been playing shotgun where everybody starts at the same time. Over here in the Open, the final pairing might not go out till 2:33 in the afternoon. So what do you do with all your time? It's something he's not used to. In that 4th round, I think he might play well tomorrow, but I would suspect on Sunday, I wouldn't think he'd play well.
Ned Michaels, by the way, who's with the broadcast for the BBC, is our guest on OutKick 360 at Ned Michaels on Twitter. What was the moment like for you watching Tiger Woods, knowing he's not going to make the cut, but walking up that 18th fairway for what seemingly is the final time at a British Open at St. Andrews?
It was bittersweet. That's what it was, because it was so great to have him here. And the fact that he is able to compete at all is a testament to his willpower and really his pain threshold. Because the 3 of us would have been puking in a bucket and not even thinking about playing golf. I mean, his leg is shredded. And the pain he must be feeling incredible. And so, I thought he was going to pause a little bit on the Swillican Bridge there on the way to the 18th green, but he didn't. Kind of tipped his cap and kept walking, which was a sign to me, and I'm probably reading too much into it, but it was a sign to me that he thinks, I'm not done yet. I'll come back here next time they have it and I'll play. I know I won't make the cut, but I'll give everybody the proper farewell at that point. But I think in his mind, he still thinks he can win an Open championship. And so, he got a little teary when he saw McIlroy tip his cap. And I think for him, he said that he felt like the entire tournament was right there watching him and cheering him on and at least acknowledging what he's done for the game and for the Open. But, the only thing, Paul, is that I wonder, like a boxer, does he think he's got a few more fights in him when maybe it would be time to shut it down?
Is there somebody, Ned, outside the top 10 who, and that's a long way off there, 7 strokes, but maybe that you think has a charge in him, particularly if Smith and the leaders come back a little bit?
Yeah, it is interesting. It's a good question. I think there are only 5 players in the top 20 who have actually won a major. So you do have some experience in Cameron Smith. He's reigning players champion again, but he's never won a major. Cameron Young has never won a major. He played in the final group of the PGA Championship in Tulsa a couple months ago, but he didn't get it done. And there's a big difference between being in the final group and actually getting it done. That being said, somebody coming outside the top 10 is going to have to play exceptionally well and get lucky with the weather, meaning they're going to have some wind. And if we get wind and we get rain over the weekend, which is slated wind for sure, maybe a little bit of rain, then listen, all bets are off. You can get somebody who's in 38th place who shoots a couple of good rounds and tees off early. So there's nobody coming off the screen right now in my mind. But I think it's the top 6 players. That's where the winner's coming from.
Well, I'm going to ask about a specific guy, quite frankly, because I bet on this player. Jordan Spieth, who's 9 back right now at 4 under, obviously a past major champion. Is he someone that, with these conditions, on this course, in this setting, could make a big charge?
Yeah, I might have picked Spieth as well to have a chance. I don't think so. 9's too many back. The weather isn't going to be, I don't think, tumultuous enough where you could go out and shoot a 65 and pick up 7 shots or something like that. I think the weather's going to be windy. The whole locations are going to be a little bit dicey. But 9, that he's going to have to go out and shoot a pair of 66s, and that probably still won't get it done. He's going to have to do something historic. He'll have to throw a 63 at it.
I'll follow the same line of questioning and follow my money, and I don't even know if I've got the guy's first name right. Tyrell Hatton.
What made you pick him?
Oh, I've got some tipsters that I follow on Twitter.
He's got his method, Ned. He doesn't want to reveal his method.
Come on,
Ned.
It's very gauche.
It's a complicated formula that he uses every time. He can't give that away.
The system.
It doesn't involve a dart, does it?
No. If it involved a dart, I'd be worse than tied for 6th.
I like Tyrrell Hatton a lot. This week especially. He's won here twice prior at St. Andrews, a tournament called the Dunhill Links Championship, where they use St. Andrews and Carnoustie and a couple of the local courses. The golf course is a different time of year. totally different setup. It's an amateur, kind of like our Pebble Beach on the PGA Tour. So the whole locations are a lot easier and more approachable. That being said, you watch Terrell Hatton in the majors, got an awful record compared to how good of a player he is. And it's because the mental stress of a major cracks Terrell Hatton. It always does. But this place he likes, and for him, it's a calming golf course. And so he knows where he's supposed to hit it. He understands if you misplay a shot, you're going to get penalized. But if you hit a good shot, you're going to get rewarded. And he's second best putter on the PGA Tour. Really, he's one of the top 5 putters on the planet. So I actually think Terrell Hatton is going to stick his nose into this thing late Sunday.
I like it.
We, Ned, we've had the privilege of being at Augusta National and stepping foot there, and you feel the place when you're there, right? There's an atmosphere, there's a vibe to it that is special. What is St. Andrews like from that vibe standpoint when you walk on those grounds, you see that clubhouse? What is that experience like for you?
When you go to church, that's like going to the Masters. But when you go to church, there's that little small chapel that really gets you. That's St. Andrews. It just has a special place in the heart of every golfer. It is the home of golf. And as soon as you step foot on the ground, you are in a spiritual, hallowed place. And so, every time you're here, you do feel it and you do appreciate it. And you just kind of sit and soak it in.
What is something, Ned, that's very well said. What's something that you would not know about St. Andrews or how special it is unless you're there? And maybe it's a place in the clubhouse, maybe it's a specific spot on the course that TV's either not going to be allowed to capture or TV can't properly capture unless you're there.
All right, there's a bunch, but I'll give you 2 that just popped to mind. First of all, on Sundays, you can walk your dog on St. Andrews, the old course. Just let them have at it. You don't need a leash or anything. Dogs and people, it's open to the public. Just have at it. Throw a ball if you want.
Very different from Augusta National in that respect. They don't allow at Augusta National, last I checked, pets on the premise. So very different.
They'd shoot your dog.
Right. They're actually in its charter. It's part of the town and part of the public landscape. So on Sundays, you and your dog can go out. And then every time I show up, you learn little tidbits and nuggets of history that you didn't know. And I'll educate you on the Valley of Sin, right, that guards the 18th green. The reason it's called that is because when old Tom Morris was building the golf course and they were dredging that part out, they found bones of human remains. And it was a burial site during the plague. And they pushed a bunch of dead bodies into this thing. And so as they were cleaning it out and as they were building this Valley of Sin, the town said, you have to stop building this golf course. You have to stop building the screen. You have to move it. And old Tom Morris said, no, I already have the design. I like the design. We're going to do it. And so they thought that was sinful. And it's called the Valley of Sin.
Unbelievable. Yeah. I had no idea. Ned Michaels educating us, entertaining us. He is live from Scotland, part of the broadcast, the BBC, for the British Open. Ned, really appreciate the time. I know it's 10:38 p.m. there, 10:39 now in Scotland, so it's late, but I really appreciate this visit. It was great catching up with you, and congrats on all the success.
Great to see you.
Man, it's always an honor to be with you all. It's been so fun to learn from you all throughout the years. Again, congratulations on the success, and call me anytime. I'm just totally honored to do it.
Cheers.
Ned Michaels, thank you so much, Ned, and enjoy Scotland as well. Really cool. I had no idea about the Valley of Sin, he called it. I didn't even know that was a thing.
I wonder what they did with where they went and reburied those remains.
And walking your dog on the old course on Sundays.
Yeah, it wouldn't apply to you. You hate dogs. You hate Sundays at St. Andrews.
So
you're a Saturday guy.
What I just heard was if I ever go to a British Open at St. Andrews, I'll be there on Thursday through Saturday.
Yeah, you're not a final round guy.
GTFO on Sunday for the dogs.
I'm sure that's suspended on Sunday of the final round.
Paul, when we come back, let's talk about what we want to see over the weekend with the British Open. This is the last few games before the All-Star break in Major League Baseball. We have, with SEC Media Days next week, we're going to tell you about some things we got going on with OutKick, with SEC Media Days coverage as well. This is kind of a transitional time of year as we enter mid-July and everything going on. So plenty of things that we can get into, and we'll recap some of the things we learned from Ned Michaels as well. That's all coming up next. This is Outkick 360. Final segment of OutKick 360 across the OutKick network, live from our downtown Nashville 6th and Peabody studios. Big thanks to Old Smoky Moonshine Yeehaw Beer for hosting us every day. Paul, big plans for this weekend? Are you going to try to embarrass another trainer in any way or make them feel bad about themselves?
No, I've got my workouts
None of that?
for the week, so I'm fine. Simon's got
No reason
an
to yell at
old
a woman
friend
this weekend?
sleeping over this weekend. He's already over, sleeping over tonight. Tomorrow, I have promised a trip to Opry Mills. I've got ulterior motives because I've got some shopping I want to do, but they will spend some time at Dave & Buster's.
Nice.
And I hope they're more into the games than they are into the prizes, because there's nothing more miserable than watching kids sort through their tickets at the Dave & Buster's prize closet room where they get stuff that they've paid a lot of money for.
We went through this in
it's
Gatlinburg
misery.
recently with my 7-year-old, where
It's
I
pain.
just, while our 2-year-old was napping, I took her to an arcade. And we got, after about an hour, I was like, okay, let's collect our tickets and go see what we can get. And in the process of a 7-year-old girl trying to
Sort through.
get the perfect
Match.
prizes,
Oh.
okay, how much now? How much do I have left? And I'm trying to do the math in my head on everything. I'm like, okay, you can get 3 of these and then 2 of these. And then, but that means you can't get that. The factoring the opportunity cost of a 7-year-old kid at an arcade toy area is very difficult.
I
So
tell you,
feel
it
your pain
only
on that
gets
one.
worse as you get a little bit older. But I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, I would like to go in. They should put a junk store next to Dave & Buster's where you go in and say, look, when we're done, I'll buy you some junk in here. Let's just give the tickets to some little kid who looks unfortunate. And we'll avoid that whole process of you having to divide. Or just get candy. Just go in and say, here's what I got. Give me all the candy I can get for that.
Yeah, and you are at a huge mall, so you could just say, here, the charity case, give this to the little kid, and then you take the boys somewhere else to buy them something.
Yeah,
in the
let's
mall.
go get ice cream.
Like I don't know what store they'd want to go to buy something,
I
but
don't either.
something else.
But
By the way, Opry Mills Mall or any mall that size sounds like hell for someone like you to be in a place like that.
If I've got a motive, if I've got something that I want to shop for, then I'm fine. And I go there maybe twice a year, seasonally. So, and then we're going to swim. I think the forecast is all right. So we'll be at the neighborhood pool and we'll have a good time there. And I've actually got some work to do. I'm going to get a better head start on Sunday night than I've been doing. I've got outstanding expenses. I finally learned the system. I've got to get those done. I got something I want to write for Monday morning at the site, and I got to do some homework on SEC meetings. So Sunday night, I'm going to try to actually do some work.
What do you want to see, Paul, at the British Open over the weekend? I gave you kind of my dream scenario.
I like your dream scenario. Look, what I want to see
Dustin Johnson
is
versus Rory on Sunday, battling it out with Liv versus the most outspoken PGA Tour player against Liv in that type of drama on Sunday, and American and someone from the UK.
I like that, and I think there'll be excellent things written about it after the fact. I don't think it'll be addressed during the telecast, which will make it a little bit awkward because I think we'll text each other and be like,
right.
Yeah, the fact that they're not saying anything about the rivalry here between the two in terms of where they're going after this is quite awkward. But I'm also going to root for my money. I've got Hatton top 5. He's 6 under and tied for 6th. Fleetwood, another guy that I bet constantly, is 3 under. Be harder for him to get up there, but some people could come back. So I've got them both top 5. I had hopes for Oosthuizen, but he didn't make the cut. But he's won there in the past, so I was rooting for him. But I just want it to be tight. Generally speaking, I don't want anyone to run away from the field. It'll hurt me if Cam Smith wins because, as I've said, I've bet on him so consistently, and I didn't think of him for this tournament for some reason.
A couple of big takeaways from Ned Michaels in our discussion. Asking him about Dustin Johnson, says, keep in mind he's been playing 54-hole tournaments with shotgun starts in the LIV Tour.
He thinks he's going to die
So he
on
thinks
Sunday.
he's going to fade starting tomorrow.
That'll be very interesting
with
to
this setup.
see guys who've been playing predominantly LIV. Not that there's anybody else at the top necessarily to watch, but to watch the
Taylor
LIV.
Gooch is at 7 under, so only 2 back.
To
from
watch the
Dustin
LIV
Johnson.
field generally and see Sunday scoring, I think will be interesting.
Yeah, and the other one was his response, and I think, Paul, you kind of hit on this earlier when we talked about it. Tiger Woods had the emotional walk down the 18 fairway at St. Andrews. Final time we're going to see him in a British Open, probably at St. Andrews, and took it all in. And the crowd, treated it that way and respected it that way. But, Ned said bittersweet watching it, because you watch a guy who's, one of the greatest of all time, and you just realize this is probably it. This is we're not going to see competitive golf out of him. And while we applaud the perseverance and the pain tolerance and everything else, it's kind of difficult to watch at times.
He made the cut at the Masters, correct?
Yes.
And it's been all downhill since then.
Well, I think he also made the cut at the PGA in Tulsa, I want to say, but withdrew
in the third round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he withdrew on Saturday.
After the third round.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, that's definitely
going
to be
look,
one to watch.
He's not on a good trajectory right now, and I don't know that he's probably going to play very little between now and the end of the season, and then gear up for a Masters again. But I don't know. Look, you said it earlier. What you hope for is that there's a dream sequence where he has a one phenomenal major left in him. But I think, it's a dream. If it happens, it'll be one of the great stories of all time. But I think it's a super, super long shot.
And in case you missed a big headline today in the NFL, the Houston Texans settle with 30 Deshaun Watson accusers out of court. Cal McNair, the owner, and the Texans released a statement saying this is no admission of guilt, no admission that we had any knowledge of anything, but just showing how serious we take these accusations. And Tony Busby, who's representing the accusers, said it's telling how different the Texans handled this as opposed to Deshaun Watson.
I really want to know the number. Like what you venture a guess on what, like 6 figures? Got to be 6 figures, don't you think?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it's if we knew the number, we'd say, man, that's a lot of money. It's probably not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things for an NFL owner.
No, not in the Texans budget.
Or an NFL team. But yeah, I would venture to say that it's quite a bit of money. So timeline to watch now. A lot of people pointing to this coming Friday, July 23rd, late afternoon news dump, or by that Monday, July 25th, for some word from the NFL on punishment.
You know what? I'm not buying the news dump idea, because I don't think, is it Sharon Robinson? I can't think of her first name.
Sue L. Robinson.
Sue Robinson, thank you.
Got to get the middle
initial. I don't know that she's interested in news dumping. She's not on the NFL schedule. If the NFL was doing it, it certainly would be a news dump. If the NFLPA was doing it, they'd certainly look to news dump. But I don't know that she's got any interest in making sure that talk shows don't have this fresh. I don't know that she's interested in making sure that websites don't get this at peak hit time. What's her incentive to news dump it? She's not beholden to the NFL on this. She's independent. And so I don't know why we're concluding that when she's done, she won't announce it. And if she's done at noon on a Wednesday, that she wouldn't announce her conclusion or reveal her conclusion. And if it's at noon on a Wednesday, guess who that's good for? OutKick 360. They'll talk about it at 2 on a Wednesday.
Speaking of OutKick 360, we'll have some great coverage for you from Atlanta. SEC Media Days all next week. You're going to be hearing a lot about that throughout the week. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have you covered there. We'll have you covered here next week as well. And, Paul, every day you've got a message for the people.
Been
on
a
the way
good
up.
week.
Yeah,
fun, my friend. Don't block the box. And be sure to lock your locks.